Brazil's President Dilma Rousseff is no newcomer to politics. After all, she was her predecessor's chief of staff. 2011 is shaping up as having a very full agenda. Apart from recovery from deadly floods, where the death toll is approaching 800, there's much to be done. A full 0.5% increase in interest rates reminded us the economy is overheating. Welcome to Agenda, where I'm joined by webcam to Stratfor's Latin America analyst, Reva Bhalla. Reva, let's start by discussing the new president's agenda.
Well, Colin, Dilma Rousseff has a lot of items on her plate, everything from major defense deals that she has to make decisions on, security issues with the country's favela issue, to important decisions Brazil has to take as it's emerging as a major regional power. One thing to keep in mind is that Dilma, she may not have the charisma as Lula, but she has a reputation for being very non-ideological, very technocratic. She employs this sort of no-nonsense attitude with her staff, and she expects her staff to come to her with a plan B in pretty much every proposal. So she's very much in the process of reevaluating a lot of major decisions right now, including the jet fighter deal, which is taking a lot of attention these days.
Who is in the frame to win the jet fighter contract?
Well, toward the end of the Lula administration, it seemed pretty clear that Brazil would go ahead and opt for the French Rafale jet for mainly political and strategic reasons. Now, Dilma has basically reopened the bidding process. U.S. firm Boeing is trying to sweeten the deal, but Brazil is very concerned about being tied to certain congressional constraints in agreeing to the U.S. deal, something that Brazil is very irked by, especially when it comes to technology transfers. Now, the Swedish Gripen offers more to Brazil in terms of price and performance, but we think this decision is still going to boil down to mainly a political and strategic decision, in that Brazil is more likely to lean more toward the French jet.
Brazilian interest rates are very high, up 0.5% this week and more to come. That's forcing the currency up, which might have two harmful effects, attracting hot money and damaging exports.
Brazil maintains a very strict fiscal policy, and for good reason, considering that the country was mired in an economic crisis just less than 2 decades ago. Now, in trying to keep inflation under control, Brazil has kept extremely high interest rates. Right now, it's at about 11.25%. Now, with a government that's likely very unwilling to cut down on public spending, there are serious side effects to this kind of policy. And one of those side effects is the boost to the country's already appreciating currency. Now, the stronger the Brazilian real gets, the less competitive Brazilian exports are on the open market. The Brazilian government doesn't really have any good options in trying to deal with this currency crisis, but it's transforming slowly into more of a political issue, especially as business and trade unions, especially in the financial hub of Sao Paulo, are applying more pressure on the state to do something to protect Brazilian industry. Again, Brazil doesn't have very good options in dealing with this, but it's definitely an issue that's going to be preoccupying the state in the coming year.
Let's turn to resources. Can Brazil really realize its dream and become a major oil exporter?
Well, it's going to be difficult, but Brazil is definitely dedicated to this project. And by the project, we're referring to the pre-salt fields, Brazil's offshore deep water fields that could potentially make Brazil a major oil exporter in the years to come. Now, this is going to require a lot of investment. We've already seen Brazil's Petrobras employ some rather unorthodox means of capitalizing this endeavor. But the Brazilian government has made clear it's going to be dedicating its resources in hopes of realizing this geopolitical dream.
What about domestic political problems like crime and drugs?
Now, Brazil faces a major challenge ahead in trying to both pacify and integrate major favelas in the city of Rio de Janeiro. Now, they've been employing a strategy called the UPP strategy that basically involves first overt military force that drives the drug traffickers out, and then a long-term police occupation. Now, this is an impressive model. It's worked on a small scale, but replicating it on a larger scale is going to be extremely difficult. What's happened so far is that a lot of the drug traffickers in favelas like Complexo Alemão, which was the last favela targeted, are simply being displaced. Now, that has side effects, especially when more drug trafficking activity is just going from favela to favela, or coming more from the favelas into the city centers. Also, these drug trafficking groups, particularly Comando Vermelho, the main group in Rio, they're extremely well armed. And if the state keeps pushing them in this pacification campaign, they do have the means of perhaps selectively carrying out attacks and trying to pressure the state into backing off of this offensive.
The other so-called BRIC countries are Russia, India and China. To what extent is Brazil joining them on the global scene?
Well, Brazil is most definitely emerging on the global scene. It's no longer this insular power that it has been for decades now. And so, of course, we see a lot of countries reacting to that. You know, Brazil is interacting with the French on major defense deals, with the Chinese in this deepening economic relationship, also with the Indians, where Brazil and India face a lot of competition with each other in certain industries. And so Brazil is learning, more and more how to assert itself on the global scene, and we can expect Brazil to fumble in a lot of respects. Brazil is also trying to involve itself in issues that are very distant from the South American continent, for example, in very thorny Middle East issues. But while this attracts a lot of attention, Brazil is slowly and gradually attempting to assume this leadership role, but it may not necessarily want to make very hard decisions or deal with the negative repercussions that may be attached to such a role.
Reva, it's good to have you with us on Agenda. I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Certainly, Brazil is a high priority for Stratfor, and we'll be watching all these issues closely.